Playoff Top 25 this week is brought to you by Goodyear. And down 9 spots after suffering a loss, Kansas hangs in the top 25. And Tulane, who's been messing around, Joey, threatening to lose, still at 9-1 and ranked in the group of 5.
Yeah, Tulane, a close game against Tulsa. They got some tough ones coming up. They should get by FAU, but then they have UTSA in their last game of the regular season.
Let's look at 20 through 16. North Carolina, after escaping Duke, is up 4 spots. Arizona continues to move up, so that could help the Pac-12 resumes, Greg.
Very much so. I mean, Arizona has been on a hot streak, and it's really improved everyone that they saw early on, including Washington, including USC, including some other teams that thought they were bad wins at one point, but now that win against Arizona is looking pretty good.
Let's look at 11 through 15. So LSU, Jaden Daniels, moves up 4 spots. Ole Miss drops a little bit, Kirk, and so does Penn State.
Yeah, I mean, these examples from 11 to 20 are examples of survive and advance. You know, I mean, it doesn't necessarily matter how pretty it is, but if you can find a way to win a football game, Duke in North Carolina, a great example of that. Now you see Penn State, even with the loss, still hovering up in the top 12. There's Ole Miss. Again, another team that struggled on the road in Athens, sitting there at 8-2, but still in the top 13.
And look at Beef, Oregon State, number 11. You know, next year, when we get to the 12-team playoff, that will be the last spot in, at least at the moment under the current format. Let's look at the top 10, starting with number 10. And number 10 is Louisville. Louisville still sneaking around. They are on the cusp of locking up a spot in the ACC championship game. They have Miami coming up this weekend. Win that game and they'll go to the ACC title game. Let's look at number 9. Number 9 and up 5 spots, the Missouri Tigers. Kirk, what do you think about that?
Good. I love it. I absolutely love it. That is a great football team. Gave Georgia all they could handle. We actually had the football down 27-21 until the big fella, Stackhouse, had the interception. So this is a deserving ranking. You can say, what about the 2 losses? I don't care. Watch them play. They're very, very sound on both sides of the football. The way Brady Cook has emerged, they got great back, great receivers, great defense. That's a great job by the committee putting them up in the top 10.
And you know, it also might be an indication of whether Georgia can move to the top spot, the respect they've given Missouri by moving them up after that win against Tennessee. At number 8, Alabama holding steady, still at 8.
Yeah, Alabama, outside of the tough loss against Texas early in the season, think about where Milroe is now compared to early in the season getting benched. Now he's playing as well as any quarterback in the country. Alabama as a team is absolutely scary sitting at number 8 with the way they're playing.
Got a date with Georgia at the end. Still have to navigate the game against Auburn in a couple of weeks. I assume we're going to see Texas still at 7. And we do, Greg.
And they're there for good reason, understandably. We had a big roundabout discussion about this last week. Cleared the committee right now based on eye test and, to an extent, resume. Values Oregon over Texas. Still a win against a ranked Kansas team, ranked Kansas State team. And you got another good win, obviously, against the 18 and a team that's 9-1 in Alabama.
They're living dangerously. Yeah. Very dangerously.
If the game would just end after 3 quarters, they'd be in good
Absolutely
shape.
right. Or maybe halftime.
Kirk, Joey says that Texas keeps trying to lose, but they don't.
I'll say this. I know head-to-head always matters. I get it. But if Alabama keeps winning and keeps looking good, now they got Georgia coming up. So this discussion at the end, and I know when you have teams that are in a cluster, head-to-head is one of the big things. Conference championship is one of the big things. But that's going to be, if Alabama keeps trending that way, and if they have to win out for this to even be a discussion. But it'll be an interesting thought because I know head-to-head is one metric, but it's not the only metric. So I'm just like you guys. I'm assuming Texas is kind of boxing Alabama out. But if you keep winning and bouncing off of guardrails and Alabama keeps getting better and better, it's worth at the very least a discussion there at the end.
And what if both of them boxed out someone that was undefeated? That could happen too. We could have a lot to talk about on Selection Day.
Yep.
At number 6, Oregon, still at number 6, the highest ranked one-loss team, our Dan Lanning's Ducks. Their path is open if they can navigate it to get to the Pac-12 championship game. At number 5, Washington just ahead. The lone blemish on Oregon's resume is that 3-point loss in Seattle and Husky Stadium.
Well, I thought that might be a spot where they could shake things up a little bit. Would Florida State maybe drop down? Washington possibly jumping up? Washington has 4 wins against teams with a winning record, including 7-3 Utah, 7-3 Arizona, and obviously team that's ranked number 6 in Oregon. So maybe their resume is just not giving them quite enough just yet.
I assume we're still going to see the Seminoles at number 4, and we do. Florida State still undefeated, turned back Miami, trying to make its season by knocking off their rival, couldn't do it. And Florida State remains unbeaten. They are in the ACC championship game, we assume, with a date against Louisville. One thing that will help the Seminole resume, if they get there, Louisville's still in the top 10, and that's who they play. That's another big notch on your resume come selection day. Let's look at number 3. So Michigan still at number 3, so this is pretty much status quo. Before we get there, Georgia and Ohio State, the 2 teams. Ohio State's held the edge through all the rankings up to this point in the college football playoff. What do you think is going to happen, Joey?
I'd imagine that Georgia has now made the jump. I mean, the way they looked against Ole Miss, they knocked off Missouri, and then the win against Ole Miss, and the way they looked while doing it with no doubt at all after the 14-14 tie, I would imagine that Georgia now moves up to number 1.
Yeah, I think Georgia should be 1. I mean, last week was about as dominant a victory as we've seen all season long against a quality team that was at that time ranked in the top 10. So while I've been very impressed by the improvements Ohio State's made offensively, there's still been a few other lackluster performances on that side of the ball to make me think that they should be in front of the Bulldogs at the moment.
So number 2. Ohio State does slip 1, which means Georgia goes to the top of the pack, and the 2-time reigning national champions, still undefeated, winning 27 in a row, is right back on top. Kirk, are you surprised at all by this?
No, I think the committee, one of the things they had to take into consideration, not just what Joey and Greg mentioned, beating a top 10 team in dominating fashion, but the big thing, if you really pull it back, they're healthy. They're peaking at the right time. Amarius Mims comes back at right tackle. He's a first rounder, makes a huge difference with that offensive line when it comes to pass protection and just mauling people at the line of scrimmage. You saw what Kendall Milton is doing now with Edwards. They've got a 1-2 punch that's healthy. Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers back. This is the Georgia team that I think everybody envisioned being and living up to that standard of the last couple of years. It's a different kind of team. They don't have those game records like Jalen Carter, but man, they are good and they are healthy and they're heading in a great direction. We could just fast forward and get to Atlanta, Georgia and Alabama, winner take all. It'll be a lot of fun.
You know, we've said all season that there's not that big separation among the very top of the rankings and the team right below them. Is Georgia starting to separate a little bit?
I think with the win against Ole Miss, we finally got to see the Georgia team that we expected, like Kirk said. Separation, I don't know how much separation there is, because when you look at the way Alabama's playing, if they were to line up right now and play one another, I don't know that I would feel very comfortable with ranking Georgia ahead of them in that game. I think Ohio State is strong. I think Michigan is strong. I am just excited that at this time of year, we still have so many viable candidates to still get into the top 4.
Well, one thing that we've talked about for a while since the playoff was introduced in 2014 was in order to win championships, you have to score points. And Georgia, and albeit maybe for a little while reluctantly under Kirby Smart, they've now completely evolved into a drop-back passing attack led by Carson Beck, who I think still, as of this moment, is among the most underrated players in the country at his position. He's got, like Kirk mentioned a moment ago, maybe the most dynamic and versatile weapon in Brock Bowers, with the Ladd McConkey that is now really coming into his own with some other really talented pieces as well. The offensive line is solidifying. The one question I have for Georgia, this is crazy because we hold them to a different standard, is their defense as good as it's been in recent years? Are they as good against the run? Because those are real question marks. I saw Missouri moving them off the ball at times. I saw Peyton Thorne hit a couple big plays in the run game when they played Auburn. So that would be my only concern about making the argument on behalf of Georgia separating. But their offense, I think, is kind of in a league of their own right now.
You see the defensive comparison between Georgia and Ohio State. Ohio State, which has been just sensational on defense this year. Kirk, I want to go a little farther down the standings. Do you have any issue with the way that the committee has stacked them up 1 through 6, particularly meaning with the 2 Pac-12 teams being just on the outside of the top 4?
I can't remember who said it earlier, but maybe it was Greg about Washington. And if you look at their resume and just look at the way they're executing, I know they had a couple down weeks. If you want to nitpick them after their Oregon game, they had a few weeks where they were just looked like they were not healthy and doing the best they could to get through it. And then they woke up these last 2 weeks, and then they get another test. They got to go to Corvallis this week against Oregon State, a top 11 team. So I'd have no problem putting them ahead of Florida State, putting them up into the top 4. The cool thing for them is, if they keep winning football games, they're going to be where they want to be. But as we sit here with still a few weeks to go, I'm sure they're maybe a little restless based on what they've already accomplished and the way they execute on that offensive side of the football for sure.